Alright, what's up gamers? Lord Gloopus back again. And as I said in the last video, we're going to be reading through this IGN interview with Miyazaki himself, and he is talking about the DLC. If you live under 14,682 different kinds of rocks, the trailer dropped today. So, extremely big deal. So, again, we have exclusive Elden Ring Director answers all of our Shadow of the Erdtree DLC questions. This is probably going to be a long video. It seems like it's a fairly long interview, but he also talks about other stuff as well. So, let's get into it. Hang on, right. I'm just going to scroll down. I'm going to skip this because whatever. So, can you set the stage for us with Shadow of the Erdtree? Where is it taking place? And can you speak kind of generally regarding what the story is going to be about? Miyazaki says, first of all, the setting of Shadow of the Erdtree is a brand new land. It's a brand new map, separate from the lands between. It is a land that is overshadowed by the particular Shadow of the Erdtree, as opposed to the Erdtree in the lands between, and it takes place again on an entirely separate, physically separate map. So it will involve a warp of sorts to get there. In terms of settings and themes, it technically occupies the same space as the lands between, the same universe, but due to something story related that we won't reveal today, this has become physically disconnected and you'll travel to the Shadow of the Erdtree land as a separate place. So the Land of Shadow itself is a place the player will visit to walk in the steps of Miquella. Miquella is a key part of the story this time, perhaps as guessed by many players who saw the art that was released previously. That is, in fact, Miquella. I'm glad we got some clarification for that. And it is he who travelled to the Land of Shadow, and it's the players who will be tracing his path and following in his footsteps, trying to see what he's going to do there. Another axis of the story is Queen Marika and what she did in the Land of Shadow and what led Miquella to follow her there. So, quite big. We're confirming that there's going to be a lot more lore about Miquella, and also in the original picture they posted, it was actually Miquella on Torrent, which means, does that mean that Miquella was the last owner of Torrent? Or just one of the owners of Torrent? That's pretty fucking cool. Alright. Speaking of this new land that we're travelling to, how is it structured? Is it structured in very much the same way as the lands between? Where are the legacy dungeons and minor dungeons? Can you describe a little bit about how the world is going to be compared to the base game? Miyazaki says yes. We think players can expect a similar experience to what they had with the base game. This is going to be structured in a similar way, as you said, with open field maps, with large scale legacy dungeons, and with small to medium scale legacies as well. So, we hope players will enjoy the same sense of scale and sense of adventure throughout that structure. Very cool. So, as far as Miyazaki's confirmed, it's going to play the same as the base game, which is great because the base game plays really well. Can you approximate the size of the world compared to the world in the base game? Miyazaki said, it's hard to answer without giving away too much and to a high degree of accuracy, but if you think in terms of size or scale, it's probably comparable if not larger than the area of Limgrave. So that's a pretty big area. Limgrave is pretty big, so there should be is a decent amount of area, to be fair. So I'm down. So, you mentioned Miquella earlier, and that's a character that I know fans have had a lot of questions about. Is there anything specifically you can tell us about the role this character will play in the DLC? And I know the trailer opens with a shot of Mohg's boss arena with the hand hanging out of the cocoon. Will we learn about what Mohg did to him? Yes, Miyazaki says. The cocoon and arm you saw at the beginning of the trailer, that is actually the point of entry to the Land of Shadow, where the players will enter into the DLC area. And this does have some relation to Miquella. So, as I said in the previous video, it looks as if you're going to have to kill Mohg the Omen, Mohg the Lord of Blood, in order to access the DLC, so if you haven't killed him yet in your current playthrough, make sure you get it done, so then you can access it straight away. Where was we? And Miquella has, as we said, travelled to the Land of Shadow. He does have some motive and some objective there, which we don't want to give away too much. But essentially the player will be following in these footsteps in the same way that they followed the blessings from the grace, the sights of grace in the lands between. They'll be following in Miquella's footsteps, and these will guide them through the land of shadow and reveal that motivation to them. And of course, the player is not the only one who is curious about Miquella. There are several characters in the world and NPCs who have been following Miquella as well, and the player will encounter them on their journey in the land of shadow, and they will make new friends and enemies, we hope. Cool, so yeah, we got new NPCs, obviously there's going to be bosses. So, yeah, just good stuff so far. I'm really excited. There were a lot of striking bosses and enemies that were revealed in the trailer, and I was wondering if we could go through a handful of them one by one, and you could either explain who or what they are, tell us an anecdote about their design, or anything you want. And I'm going to do my best to describe them because I don't know the names of them. First off, there's like a giant basket of flaming kindling. Miyazaki says okay. So this giant basket of flame, as you so eloquently put it, Mitchell, was a terrible weapon you used in a war that occurred in the Land of Shadow, basically. So again, without saying too much, we can't give away the name just yet officially, but yes, it was a really gruesome weapon that was used. And the kindling that you see is actually the remains of bodies that were put in there to burn. So there's that friendly fellow. Jesus Christ, that is way darker than I thought it'd be. Okay, cool. And then there's an absolutely terrifying worm with arms that eats people whole. Miyazaki said, it's hard to talk about some of these enemies without spoiling anything. Hopefully you understand, but there is a significant connection between these enemies, the way they are, and the Land of Shadow. Okay, I'm just going to skip to the last one if it's okay, but what could you tell me about the man in red with snakes and flames that's kind of like the focal point of this trailer? So he's talking about Mesmer here, Mesmer the Impaler. Yes, we can speak to this character a little bit. This is as you say, a key figure in this DLC. We believe he'll be officially revealed to be Mesmer by the time the trailer goes live, and yes, he's a key figure in the DLC, and he again has this important element of shadow to him, which is a key theme throughout the DLC as well. As you may have seen at the end of the trailer, there was a piece of key art where it shows Mesmer sat in his throne-like chair, and people who've played the game may recognise this throne to be one of those from the boss room where you battle Morgoth. And this represents the thrones at the base of the Erdtree, and it's supposed to symbolise that Mesmer stands on equal footing to these other demigods and children of Marika who sat down in these thrones and held the rooms of the Erdtree. So he is an important figure who rivals these other demigods. And as you play the DLC, you will learn a little about why he wasn't featured in the legends of the Erdtree, the lands between. You'll realise why he exists in this shadow, this land of shadow. Very cool stuff. I'm excited to see what the hell he's supposed to be, how he's related to the demigods of Marika herself. As I mentioned before, he has the flaming red hair, so, you know, that's some Radagon vibes right now. Switching gears for a second, one of the big news points I think in Elden Ring was that the scenario was written by George R.R. Martin. Did he have any kind of role in the planning of Shadow of the Erdtree? And if so, just out of curiosity, have you talked to him since the game has come out, and has he had any kind of reaction to the outstanding success? Miyazaki says, the way George Martin's story has been incorporated is the same as it was with the base game. And to avoid misunderstanding there, we just want to point out that he hasn't written anything exclusively and new for the sake of his DLC. But it would still be fair to say that he and his mythos, I don't know, that he created for us are involved in the creation of Shadow of the Erdtree in the same way. And the reason for that is that in making the base game and making Elden Ring, we took from that mythos, but we only took one part of it. We took from the part that created the story of Elden Ring and created the world that we wanted to envision, and the Shadow of the Erdtree is yet another part of that original mythos that he wrote, and that has inspired us to create the story of his DLC. As for your second question, Mr. Martin and I have at least exchanged emails since the release, but unfortunately we haven't been able to meet and speak in person. It's something I've wanted to do since the release and talk to him again and share in our joy for the game hopefully, but unfortunately he has just been so busy that we haven't had a chance yet, but I'll keep looking for an opportunity. That's cool. At least they keep in contact in some way, and it would be cool to have that meet up. How much is left? Not much. Okay, cool. It's been 2 years now since Elden Ring has launched, and much of the hardcore audience have already found the best gear. They fought the hardest bosses, and they're at such high levels that I imagine it must be difficult to come up with content that can provide a challenge for those hardcore fans without making it too hard for some of the more casual Elden Ring players. So with all that said, how do you approach difficulty with a DLC such as this? Miyazaki says, our general approach to difficulty has of course not changed to Elden Ring. We want to create a challenging experience that tests the players and that gives them a feeling of satisfaction and accomplishment when they get through these struggles. However, we do want to stress that there's still a freedom of approach and a breadth of strategy to these encounters. And that means both how you approach them if you want to face these challenges, or come back to them later and circumvent them and find another way around and come back when you're ready. The same philosophy is taken in Shadow of the Erdtree. And again, to our more hardcore players, they will find optional bosses who have been tuned in a similar way to the likes of Malenia, who are not crucial. Great, so we're gonna get Malenia Duo. Okay, cool. They said, oh god. Miyazaki goes, yeah, you might remember her. They're not crucial to completion of the DLC, but they are an optional extra to help challenge for those who are so inclined. That said, there may not be another boss on exactly the same level as Malenia, but we do feel like this is somewhere that we've paid close attention to. This level of challenge and offering that same level of freedom, and we hope that players are able to blossom in the Land of Shadow in the same way that they are in the Lands Between. Actually, I want to redress that. It's not the fact that it's only a lesser level to Malenia, but we have prepared bosses on that, with that similar mindset within the DLC area, one that will challenge the player and hopefully be as memorable as Malenia was. Yep, so we're gonna get a few... I like the idea that they're gonna make these really AIDS bosses completely optional, so you don't actually have to do them in order to complete the DLC, but if you want to kill all bosses in the DLC, you have to. That's cool. So, final question on the topic of Shadow of the Erdtree, but do you envision this is the end of Elden Ring's story, or is there room for either more DLC or an Elden Ring 2 down the line? Miyazaki said, we don't want to say this is the end of the Elden Ring saga for now. I think we said a similar thing at the end of Dark Souls 3. We didn't want to flatten those possibilities or put a pin in them just at that time, and it's a story similar to Elden Ring. We don't want to discourage the possibilities for that, there might be more ideas in the future. We don't have any current plans to make a second DLC or sequel, but we definitely don't want to snuff out that possibility. We think that there could well be something in the future. So, basically, Elden Ring 2 confirmed. No, I get that. He's not saying no, but he's not saying we're making more, which is fine. So, okay, he's talking about From Software here, but I might as well read it as this last question. So he goes, lastly, the state of the game industry right now is pretty rough. There's a lot of layoffs, studio closures. The PS5 apparently is already in a latter stage of its life cycle. Has the landscape of the industry changed your outlook at all on From Software's future? So Miyazaki goes, yes, I'm aware the situation in the game industry it's going through right now is quite harrowing. I think in terms of speaking to all those things that are happening, like layoffs and closures at other studios, I think it's difficult for me to understand the exact circumstances there. I won't speak to those in specifics. Just speaking on behalf of From Software, I think we are very blessed in the way that we have a lot of keen up and coming developers who've grown and they've developed within the studio, and they've reached these director positions where they're able to direct projects such as the recent Armored Core 6. Banger, by the way, if you haven't played it. We have several of these up and coming directors who were able to delegate these projects to, and were able to have multiple projects on the go at once. What I foresee in this climate, at least for us, is a From Software where games can be directed by others, not only myself. I think in the face of that struggle and the place where the games industry is at right now, I do see this as a time for us to continue to grow and continue to cultivate this talent and continue to release these games for as long as we can. Common Miyazaki dub right there. We love Miyazaki. He's the GOAT. We love Miyazaki. But this interview is really cool. We found out a lot of stuff. Basically, DLC is going to be nuts. There's going to be bosses that are ideally equal to Melania in terms of bullshit, and you have to kill Moog. So yeah, that's the interview. There's a Eurogamer interview that he done as well, but right now I just can't be bothered to read it because I just want to play Elden Ring. So yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments if you made it this far, and I'll catch you guys later. Where's my mouse? There's my mouse. Bye!